The Untold Adventures of Biao. Season 1. Episode 25. After solving Diao Lu's case, it was almost morning. Mr. Gong took Biao and Fei on their way back to their village. On the way, Biao recalled the previous story out of curiosity. He did not know what connection his father had with the shaman Zhang Bai. "Dad, in the past, where did you go for adventure? How do you meet the shaman of Miaoging in the south? This kind of witchcraft is so mysterious. Can you tell us, Dad?" The two young men were very curious about the magic of the evil Miaoging shaman, so they asked Mr. Gong. Mr. Gong thought they were still young and needed to learn more, so he didn't want to hide anything. He sighed and slowly told the story to Biao and Fei. "If I did not save him a life that year, he wouldn't continue on the path of harming people till nowadays. It was a few decades already. It's when I was still young. The story began decades ago." Mr. Gong was asked by his friend. He went to the Miaoging region to hunt for a treasure called the Spider's Fire Marble. Mr. Gong tried to search the forests for a year because he hunted the news that the Spider's Fire Marble was on the body of an evil spider that was cultivating in the deep forest. After many days of arduous stalking, he finally lured the spider into an open space. He cut bamboo to set up a hexagonal formation to catch this devil spider. The hollow bamboo tubes went deep into the ground. He poured sulfur powder directly into the tubes to let it go deep underneath, forcing the evil spiders to rise to the surface. After setting up, he patiently retreated to hide and waited for the spider to appear. Not to his surprise, there was movement underground just half an hour later. It looked like the evil spider couldn't stand it and be about to appear. The ground in the ceiling zone of the 6 bamboo tubes had begun to extrude from the bottom, shaking slightly on the ground. The ghost spider was emerging. Not long after, a giant black spider appeared. Its eyes were like fireballs, and its body was as big as a meter. The spider was both giant and fierce, kicking the ground and splashing. There was something that looked like a human face on the back of the spider. It seemed that it has cultivated into a spirit spider already. The spider was like crazy, panicked and turned around to find a way to escape. But all directions were blocked by bamboo trees with enchanted charms. After a while, seeing that the spider was exhausted and stopped moving, Mr. Gong stood up, holding a rope connected to the trap and yanked. As soon as Mr. Gong gave a pull, the 6 bamboos were bundled together and locked the spider. Mr. Gong thought he successfully caught the spider, and the spider was paralyzed by sulfur, so it could not fight either. However, the spider became aggressive and wanted to risk its life with Mr. Gong. It spewed a large amount of poison towards Mr. Gong, seemed to want to die together. This move really made Mr. Gong surprised. This poison was cultivated by spiders for many years. If contacted, there was no cure. Fortunately, Mr. Gong reacted in time, tried his best to avoid the poison. Although he reacted extremely quickly and saved his life, the shirt was touched. Before Mr. Gong could regain consciousness, he saw that the corner of his shirt had melted, emitting toxic gas. It was fortunate for Mr. Gong to dodge the poison that even the devil would afraid of. Mr. Gong had no intention of killing it at first. But now, the spider was cultivated to have that deadly poison and it also so aggressive. It was likely that many people would be harmed by it in the future. Mr. Gong decisively shotted kunai at it. Because it was his unique weapon, he launched it very accurately. In one shot, he accurately shot the head between 6 angry red eyes. Perhaps the kunai hit the spider's brain. He saw the spider was in great pain. After struggling for a while, the spider was exhausted and laid limp. Mr. Gong carefully approached, using a bamboo tube to stab the face on the spider's back. He was told that if the spider was killed by metal, its big eyes, which were the spider's fire marble, would turn to ashes. Therefore, he carefully took out the spider's fire marble with his own hands. If the spider's fire marbles were obtained while the spider was still alive, it would retain the mana and increased potion effectiveness. But if gained when the spider was dead, the fire marbles would only have a partial effect. Mr. Gong quickly used his hand to grab the fire eyeball while the spider was still alive. Holding a glittering red marble in hand, he was overjoyed because it finally came to success after a year of hard work. He decided that he would give one to his friend, and the rest he would keep for himself. At this moment, suddenly a rat's cry came from the western woods. These rats were assigned by Mr. Gong to be on alarm duty. Mr. Gong knew something happened, but it was already dark, and even though he tried to look, he couldn't find anything. The alarms of the rats grew louder. It seemed that the other man could no longer hide patiently. Mr. Gong saw a shadow run away. Mr. Gong didn't know who followed him all the way here without being detected. This guy must be a master. But because Mr. Gong just had a battle with the spider and was carrying a treasure along, it was not convenient to chase the stalker. Mr. Gong quickly left the place. He returned to a small inn at the foot of the mountain in a deserted hamlet. By the time he got back, it was already midnight. He happily sat down to rest and looked at the treasure. He just needed to keep it safely, bring it to the trustee, and it's all done. Looking at the sparkling red marbles, suddenly Mr. Gong felt something was wrong with his body. He felt cold, and his heart pounded, throbbing with pain. One arm was numb. Having lived in this wild Miaoging land for a year, he also had some knowledge of black magic. He immediately took a mirror to check the symptoms on his face. Looking at himself in the mirror, he was sweating profusely. His forehead was as gray as a corpse, and his eyes were red as if they were about to burst. He was sure this was a sign of being poisoned. He was taught by his friends how to cure these poisons to protect himself. Moreover, he was also knowledgeable in exorcism. Mr. Gong quickly took off his shirt and took out a set of needles. Without hesitation, he quickly inserted the needle into the vein of the numb arm, continuously inserting the needle all the way to the heart. After inserting all 8 silver needles from his left arm toward his heart, Mr. Gong began to feel the toxin being pulled away and concentrated on this arm. Despite using giant needles to absorb poison, Mr. Gong didn't seem to be in any pain. He stared with a serious face as he looked at his arm, blackened by the toxin. At this time, he took a knife and made a slight cut on the wrist. The poisoned black blood began to gush out incessantly. After releasing a large amount of black blood, the blood color also gradually turned red. At this time, Mr. Gong was assured that the toxins in the body have been removed. Although the poison was easily cured, Mr. Gong couldn't help being angry with the one who harmed him. He immediately called for help. "Mouse, go find the one who wants to harm me."